building Fintech Trust from 0 to 100. So let's give a warm thank you and a warm welcome to Erin, VP of Communication at Current, Matt, the CEO of Stakeholder Labs, Ted from Vested, and Erika, Head of Marketing at FundGuard for this session. Let's give them a warm welcome to the stage. This is the anthem for
All right, thank you, thank you. I want to start just by thanking the audience for coming, but I also want to congratulate you because you made it to Wednesday of Money 2020, and that in and of itself is noteworthy. So I appreciate you being here and spending the time with us. My name is Ted Birkhahn. I'm managing director of Vested. We are a full service marketing communications firm that specializes in working with financial companies. We represent fintechs of all sizes and at all stages. Say the one thing they have in common is they all work really hard every day to build and maintain trust. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today. We have a great panel, so I want to get right to it because we don't have a ton of time. I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. When you tell us who you are and what you do, also talk a little bit about the audiences that you're trying to reach, and most importantly, who you're trying to build trust in. And then we can jump into it from there. So turn it over to Erin to jump in.
Great, thank you, Ted. I'm Erin Bruehhl. I'm VP of Communications at Current. We are a consumer fintech based in New York, so all mobile spending accounts, secured credit, earned wage access. I joined as VP of Comms over 5 years ago. I say, or startup life, maybe my entire life. So worn a lot of hats there over the years. I say in terms of stakeholders, really in communications, they run the full gamut from the media to our investors, to our partners, to our consumers. So a lot of different people that you're communicating different messages to and like building trust with them in a lot of different ways.
Matt Joanou, co-founder and CEO of Stakeholder Labs. We help publicly traded companies modernize their investor marketing and financial communications through data-driven technologies. We're an early stage company. We've been building for about 2 years. I'm based in Los Angeles. As far as our stakeholders, we're working through a B2B lens. So we're selling into publicly traded companies, often working with investor relations, CFOs, corporate comms, but ultimately we're helping them build trust with their shareholders and build trust with the investment and markets community. So it's oftentimes putting ourselves in that seat and thinking about how we're helping them build trust on their end.
I'm Erika. I head up marketing communications for FundGuard, which is a new cloud-native investment accounting software platform for asset managers and asset servicers in the institutional space. And we are mid to late stage startup. We closed our Series C back in April at $100 million and had some strong anchor clients in place and now live in production. In terms of our stakeholders, we are speaking with the heads of operations, CTOs, COOs at some of the world's largest institutional asset managers and their service providers. And we are asking them to fundamentally change the way they've been doing things for decades. And that comes with a lot of trust building before we can get them to let us in the room and then let the little starters to talk about their operation.
Great. Thank you all. So where I want to start this conversation is around the challenges, the obstacles in building trust. And there's obviously no shortage of that. So Erin, I want to start with you. Talk to us a little bit about what are some of the biggest obstacles that you face currently and even in the past in building trust in the fintech brand?
Yeah, so when I started Current, summer 2019, and our consumer spending accounts had just launched. So we were relatively unknown. We raised a Series B right after I joined. So, and I was an early stage company where we were wearing a lot of hats. And, I did not come from a financial background myself. So I worked in sports and travel tech previously. So I had a lot of learning to do, so we raised our Series B about 2 months after I joined. And that was really our first media moment that we had some news. So the biggest challenge I had at the time was, okay, none of these reporters know who I am, and very few of them know who Current is. And where do you start, especially an early stage company? So kind of one of the things I quickly learned was, kind of the former reporter in me too, was, you do your research, right? So it's like, okay, who are some other people in the space? Who are reporters who cover these kinds of things? And then the next challenge was getting them to answer my emails and say like, hey, you know what is current? Hey, we have an announcement coming up. We like to cover it, have it exclusive. And, the biggest challenge was honestly getting them to open emails and say like, okay, wait, what is this company? And, I think the quickest thing I learned in that regard, and, and we did, TechCrunch covered it as an exclusive because, that's what they cover. They cover early stage seed rounds and, seed to Series B and do a lot of funding announcements. But that was really, honestly, like starts from the beginning is like introducing yourself to reporters and that trust kind of like, okay, I had real news then. Those reporters saw like I wasn't blowing smoke up, that this was a real story. And that was the biggest factor is kind of reputation with the media. And I say like those are things that I still preach to this day is making sure you have a real story to tell. So those reporters that when they see your email come in, they know they can open it because you're coming to them with something that's real. And it's also making sure you have something real, not falling afraid of, oh, we need to get coverage of this from, some other stakeholder that you have, but pushing back and saying like, that's not a good story. So the media that see emails from me now, it's like, well, Erin's only going to come to me with something that's real news, that's a real story, and it's nothing that's going to be a waste of my time because that's the worst thing you can do to somebody.
I think it's really, really good advice. And I often say with journalists, you have to make the connection of how it's relevant to their readers, right? So if you make that clear, whether it's in the initial pitch or during conversations, you're more likely not only to get interest, but to get coverage for the brand or for whatever announcements I make. Great. Appreciate that. Matt, I want to turn to you for Stakeholder Labs. What are some of the big challenges you've faced in building and maintaining trust over the last few years?
Yeah, it's a good question. Erin's last point about making sure you have something real when you're talking to journalists and looking through the comms lens. I shift to the sales side and it's very similar. Early stage companies, you're having to partner with large potential clients. And part of the challenge is building that trust up front. And the impulse a lot of early stage companies have is to promise the world, to sell a silver bullet. And I think overselling is where you lose trust and where you really put yourself in a tricky situation. You want to make sure that you're finding partners that believe in a shared vision of the future, that want to come alongside you and help you build towards that future. And I think that's where, to Erin's point, you have something real and you're able to show them, hey, we're going to do this together. This is where we're at transparently. This is where we want to go. This is how we're going to get there together. And in the early stage, you're starting from scratch. So you're pitching them on this concept of a product or a service that is going to get them to a new level. And particularly for us, we're selling into publicly traded companies. We have to be very buttoned up. But what I found is that starting from exactly where you're at, even if that's a baseline, with the right client that believes in the shared vision, is how you start to build that trust. And then you can work your way up the stack, but you have to be setting the right expectations, not overselling, not promising them the world, being realistic, and going into a more innovative direction.
Matt, that point about overselling is so important. And it actually leads to our next question, which is really around authenticity, right? And the role that authenticity plays in building and maintaining trust. And Eric, I'd like to turn to you and ask for your thoughts on the role that authenticity plays and just how it plays into your everyday work in building the brand for your company.
I think, and we've talked about this, and I think some of you may have heard a bit of this too, is you have to do away with the notion of B to B and even B to C, because it's ultimately people to people. When you're a relatively unknown brand and you're new to market and you're asking large global institutions to rethink systems that they're unfamiliar with and do things a new way, you're going to do that by earning the trust of individuals. And when you don't have necessarily a reputation yet as a brand, you also need to look at the individuals within your own organizations who do have a certain level of gravitas and are known and do have their own personal brand reputation, and bring them into the fold so that as you're looking to earn trust within the companies that you're selling into, you're doing so at an individual by individual level. And you do that also by fundamentally understanding the different roles and functions that are going to ultimately be impacted by the product or the service that you're bringing into the organization. And you speak to them, you listen, you have conversations, and understand what is keeping them up at night, cliche to say, and also know how on a day-to-day basis what's bringing them pain, and help them to understand not this is what we're going to do for your company, but this is going to be how we make your day-to-day processes and work easier, and why doing it our way is better than the way that you're doing it now. And you do that, one by one, and eventually you build and earn the trust of the individuals, and then you start to build that trust more broadly with the companies.
Great, appreciate that. Let's get into the trenches a bit, because I think we all know building trust is hard. It's obviously critical to the health of the brand. So let's get into the trenches and talk about messaging and storytelling, because that's really at the heart of building trust. So Matt, I want to start with you. What are some best practices that you can share with folks here who are thinking about how do I start to develop that message map and just identifying stories that can help build trust, whether it's you telling that story or influencers or customers helping tell the story for you?
Sure. It's a good question. I think in the early days, going back to the previous point around finding partners that have a shared vision of the future and building alongside them, a lot of the work we're doing internally, we're researching, we're exploring, we're trying to find new ideas. And what's done very well for us is actually externalizing a lot of that. So the same research and work that we're doing internally, we're sharing with our partners. We're also bringing them in, not just on the product we're building, but as we're thinking about what is the direction of this. And again, we're working with publicly traded companies, investor relations, comms team, CFOs. So sometimes it's partnering with them to further a new initiative that they're trying to figure out on their end and externalizing that. I think the other piece is asking the question of how can we support folks in the industry, trade organizations that are already doing a lot of this research, this thought leadership, and coming alongside them. There's, in the finance world, a lot of powerful programs and platforms that are being built. And again, it's aligning with them. So for us in the early stage, it's sharing, it's being transparent, and helping the thought leaders that are already moving this direction by providing support or providing some complementary service to what they're already doing.
Great. I want to build on this notion of thought leadership because we throw that term around a lot in our industry. And if you ask 10 people for the definition of thought leadership, you'll get 10 different answers. So, Erika, I know thought leadership is a big part of your marketing mix. What does thought leadership mean to you? How do you define it, and how do you implement it within your organization?
So in the case of FundGuard, we are selling software, an investment accounting platform, but we're also selling change and transformations across global investment operations. And so what we're looking to do is create sort of a talkability aspect for the FundGuard brand. That is not just FundGuard bringing their own proprietary thought leadership to market on this concept of change and transformation, but also partnering with our clients, partnering with other industry organizations, strategic alliances, who share similar philosophies around those concepts of change, and asking them to take part in our thought leadership so that we're in effect creating a conversation within the ecosystem that we serve that is not just us talking at our market, but it's others within the market, speaking with each other and singing from the same hymnal, informed by the ideas that we bring to market. So and I know we're going to talk a bit about how we do that later. So
absolutely, no, appreciate that. I want to go back to Erin, you for a moment, just on the messaging front, your roots in journalism and PR. Anyone can develop messages, right? It doesn't mean those messages are going to resonate with the audience that you're trying to reach. And oftentimes, I think companies fall short of doing that. So how do you ensure the messages that you're creating, that you're arming your executive teams with, will resonate with a very tough and skeptical audience? What's your trick?
Yeah, no, I think Matt's point actually is a great one about making sure you're providing value to somebody. I think that's kind of the key thing. And I think it starts when you're working with media and trying to break through a lot of noise. Because versus there's right, there's a lot of us all here. We all work at great companies. We all have a story to tell. But I think number one is you need to have a clear idea of number one, why is your company different? And what problems is it solving in the market? Start there and being like, okay, whether you're talking to investors, whether, my CEO is speaking at a conference, like, what is the overarching message? Are you talking to the media? Are we talking to consumers who, most of our consumers, are people who live paycheck to paycheck, who haven't, had bad experiences at traditional banks or haven't had a bank account before and, charged overdraft fees, etc. So I think number one is being clear about how your product solves problems in the market. Because otherwise you're not going to stand out. My CEO could give a talk at a conference. Well, how is it different from one of our competitors? So being very clear about like how your product solves a problem in the market. And also having, again, to go back to, my earlier point about having a moment in time where that's relevant. So instead of just being like, oh, hey, we want to talk about this now because we exist. Well, what is happening right now in the market, in the world that makes this relevant? Part of the conversation.
So tying into the news cycle and what's relevant in the moment is critically important. I want to dive a little bit deeper into differentiation because you mentioned two things. One is around what problem are you solving? What's the value prop of the company or the product or the service? Critically important. And I think that's what potentially makes it newsworthy, relevant, et cetera, for the audience that you're trying to reach. But differentiation is a different story. You can solve a problem without being different. So, Matt, I want to start with you, and then Eric, I'd love to get your input on this as well. What role does differentiation play in building trust? And probably more importantly, what happens if you don't have differentiation? What impact does that have on this whole mix?
Yeah. In our stage, early stage, it's critical. We need to focus on exactly what is our point of differentiation. We're competing with a lot of legacy multiple players, and so often we're stressing our innovation. And obviously, most companies are trying to stress their innovation. That's the name of the game. But I think when you look at telling that story, it's going deeper with the clients in your actual conversations to show how they're saving time, how they're saving money, how they're able to have deeper connections with their clients, or in our case, their shareholders, their investors. And then on top of that, I think going back to my earlier point, it's having the receipts, to use a kind of modern term. So showing how these results have impacted your existing clients, how these results might impact the client that you're trying to close, and being able to use the data to actually showcase the points of differentiation and how those will be measured. So I think as companies are working with clients in that early stage, it's setting expectations around this is the vision, here's the points of differentiation, and then we're able to measure that. And 6 months from now, you'll see that we're performing X better than that competitor on this variable. We're performing Y better than this other competitor on that variable. So it's tying it back to data, because you can say all you want, but you actually have to prove that it works at the end of the day.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Erika, how about you on the differentiation?
So I'd like to play off of that. I think, Erin, you were talking about making sure that not only does the content that you deliver bring value, but that you're also communicating your value. And then with that, what makes it distinct. And it's not just about communicating that value to those that are in the room in the moment, if you've got your salespeople around the room, or to the decision makers, and communicating that differentiation. As you can say, in the case of FundGuard, we're a completely new tech stack. We are able to do what we do because our technology is different than any of the other incumbent investment accounting providers. And that's true, but so what, right? And so you need to be able to answer that so what to everyone in the room that's ultimately going to be a stakeholder, whether they are a COO who's looking to bring down costs and create significant operational efficiencies, or the investment and fund accountants who are, very tactically using your product on a day-to-day basis. And so have those conversations with them again to understand where they're going to see the benefit of the differentiation that you bring. How does this new and unique technology make my day-to-day, day-in-life workflows better and make my job easier, and be able to have that conversation up and down the value chain, and also in some cases with your clients and those strategic alliances of yours that are servicing.
It's great. I want to go a little bit off script here, and so bear with me. This is not the off the record stage, but still, I want to talk about pitfalls. And we all know that we can learn very valuable lessons from failure. Whether it's you yourself or your brand failing or watching others and making sure that you apply those lessons learned. So talk about I'll start with you, Erin. Talk about some of the pitfalls that you've seen out there, whether it's your own experiences or others, where they tried to build trust, but in result, they actually ended up eroding trust in the brand among the audiences that were most important to them.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I don't that's ever happened to me at the current wood, or whatever that is. But I think where a lot of people in communications can go wrong in that regard is trying to walk back something that you told or one of your executives told a reporter on the record. Unless you made it very clear this was off the record, etc., that is the biggest way to erode any kind of trust. And it goes both ways, right? Like, you can give a reporter something and say it's off the record and they can publish it. And, that's also a terrible way to go about it. But I think, and I saw an example recently where there was, it was actually video, and they tried to convince the media outlet not to publish that part of the clip. But this was a conversation we had. This was on the record. And instead, this media outlet outed who the communications person was that made this request. And there is no bigger way, in my mind, than to, and granted, you can go to reporters if there's a mistake made, like, okay, could you please fix this? Whether that's not what we do, that's an incorrect number, that's not our valuation, things that could have larger ripple effects. But when you tell somebody some information, this goes back to staying on your talking points and giving to their executives, is making sure everybody knows what to say and what not to say. If there's something that's confidential, don't say it, because you tell you as a communications person, it's a lot easier than trying to fix something later. But the biggest way to erode trust is to try to walk back something that you promised them up front.
Yeah, once it's out there, it's out there. Very hard to claw it back. Matt, how about you? You're a founder. You're an entrepreneur. Failure is in that ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you achieve success. What's been your experience in terms of some of the pitfalls in trust building?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've talked a little bit about setting expectations. I'll actually go back to my time before Stakeholder Labs. I spent 5 years at Reddit helping rebuild that business from the ground up. They're obviously doing very well. They just had a fantastic earnings call, but early days, Reddit was in some challenging situations. And as far as building trust with potential clients, we were selling into large brands and agencies and convincing them that we had an option that they should look at next to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everyone else at the time. Part of the challenge was we talked a little bit out of both sides of our mouths when we're pitching the platform. We talked about efficient impressions, so competing with Facebook on cheap CPMs, and then we talked about the uniqueness of the platform, the community-based architecture, the ability to be authentic on the platform, and we ended up building trust on both sides, but they were competing. And we had some brands coming to us that wanted efficient impressions and just align on media plan, and then we had others that wanted to get very creative and very unique. And I think the lesson I learned there was, in retrospect, we probably should have really focused on the unique value of our platform. What are we bringing that no one else is bringing them, rather than shifting gears to try to compete with everyone else? And while that got us indoors and it got us on media plans, we had to then rebuild trust with a lot of the clients that were looking for cheap impressions on the uniqueness of our platform. So that was mostly a lesson in looking at, you want to build the right kind of trust for your business. And if you're building a value prop or trust around a value prop that is not going to be your long-term play, that's when you get into some trouble down the road.
So consistency in how you communicate around the value prop is really critical, so you're not switching back and forth over time and confusing the marketplace.
Exactly. And it worked out. Reddit figured it out, but it was definitely a lesson learned.
Got it. Great. I want to switch gears, and Erika, I want all of you to have input on this because it's critical. The holy grail of marketing, measurement. How do you measure trust? Would love your input on that. I know you think about this every day. How do you measure it, and how do you talk to your C-suite about it? Especially when you have executives, and maybe this is something you've experienced in past jobs, where executives don't really understand the value of marketing, the value of trust. So how do you measure?
There is, there are good old fashioned digital, quantitative metrics that you can apply, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I think what's important, particularly when you're selling enterprise solutions and you're in sales cycles that are 2 or 3 years long, you need to not focus so much on volume of leads day to day, because if you're, again, oftentimes your market is finite. There's not hundreds of leads to be had a day, but rather what you're doing is laying out breadcrumbs and nurturing relationships, whether it's digitally, whether it's in person at events, whether it's putting out, again, content and thought leadership, and seeing how and what your audience is engaging with, and being able to feed that insight back to your business development team is important. And so at FundGuard and with our CEO and head of sales, rather than looking at marketing qualified leads, which has sort of become the de facto, we're looking at marketing touch points across every phase of the pipeline and at every point of the funnel, ensuring that we have content, collateral, marketing tactics that can feed the top, bottom of the funnel to help accelerate opportunities as they come through. But being able to then measure through the digital breadcrumbs, who's reading what topics engage you to engage them. Can we glean any insights from what they're looking at to help inform the conversations? And a lot of that then becomes, we can show, we've, at any given time, 20+% of the current sales pipeline was significantly driven by marketing touchpoints. We can show that with metrics from our CRM and our marketing automation tools, and we can show the ever increasing levels of engagement, which is important. But then there's also a lot of anecdotal feedback that comes in terms of that trust building. So all of the right people are engaging with our content; they're consistently engaging with it. But is that translating to more meetings? Is that translating to, acceleration of existing opportunities? And then also, when you show up in person, so I'm talking about pure digital nurturing and measuring that. When you show up in person at industry conferences or you host a roundtable, are all of those folks actually physically showing up? Are they coming and proactively seeking you out and looking to have conversations with you? And then also more broadly, the ecosystem that supports those same customers, your strategic alliances and partners in media, are they also consistently and proactively coming to you to engage? And you want to see that increasing over time to ensure that that trust is not only growing, but or is not only maintained, but growing beyond.
So it's really a combination of direct correlation, indirect correlation, anecdotal evidence sprinkled in there. It's looking at everything to try to tell a full story about the impact of the efforts that the market takes. Well, listen, I could talk to you three all day long, but unfortunately, we are out of time. Time definitely flies when you're having fun. Appreciate you all being here, and really appreciate you all being here and giving all the great input that you did. Give it up for a round of applause for our panel.